You're listening to Talking to Teens, where we speak with leading experts from a variety of disciplines about the art and science of parenting teenagers. I'm your host, Andy Earle. We're here today with Jonathan Cristall. He is the author of What They Don't Teach Teens: Life Safety Skills for Teens and the Adults Who Care for Them. Jonathan has spent his career as a prosecutor, so he knows the criminal justice system, and he was looking for a book about what he needs to teach his own kids about how they need to deal with police when they're getting stopped and questioned by police, how they need to deal with things like sexual consent, what are the laws and rules about these things, what are their rights, and he realized there isn't really one book where it's all in one place. So he decided to take his expertise from his career working as a prosecutor as well as his certification as a sexual violence prevention instructor and his experience working with teenagers, families, and schools, and to write this book, What They Don't Teach Teens. Really excited to discuss all of these great issues with Jonathan today. So we got an interesting topic today, and I've been reading your book here the last couple days, What They Don't Teach Teens: Life Safety Skills for Teens and the Adults Who Care for Them. And I've been learning some stuff in this book that I'm going to need to apply to my own life, especially, next time I have any run-ins with police officers, law enforcement, the judicial system. And there's a few things in this book making me think about my digital life as well. So really interested to talk about all that and more. Can you just walk me through what kind of led you to putting all these things together and writing this book?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Andy. So basically, this journey of mine started over 5 years ago. I've been married for 20 years to my wonderful wife, Lisa. We have 3 sons. And about 5 years ago, we were watching TV, really almost out of the blue. She says to me, we got to teach our older sons about sexual consent. And I agreed it was time. And I reflected on what my mom taught me. I'm 49. So when I was a young person, no means no. And that's not even close to what the standard is today. It's woefully inadequate. There are lots of reasons why someone may not say no, but not want the sexual activity. So it got me thinking, okay, what else do I need to teach my sons? What else is their school very unlikely to teach them, either because they don't know it or they don't have the time? So I wrote down a list, and it was really long. Police interactions, their rights, digital footprint. What is sexual harassment? What does that mean? What acts constitute sexual harassment? Street safety, sextortion, cyberbullying. The list was long. And so I started searching for a book. I thought, I'm not the only parent who wants their kids to learn this information. There has to be a single source that has the information that so many of us want to have at our fingertips. And I looked everywhere and I found nothing. So as my background is as a veteran prosecutor for the city of LA, I teach sexual violence prevention. I was a troubled teen. My wife said to me, she said, "Hey, bud, you're up. Why don't you write the book that you're looking for?"
Yeah.
And I said yes. And 5 years later, it took me 5 years because, I'm a very involved father. I'm an involved husband, and I have a career as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And October 6th, yesterday, the book was published, and it's been, it's gotten great reviews and hearing great things from people. And so it's very exciting.
It's got some nice illustrations. It's really nicely put together with everything in really a nice way, I think.
It's interesting. Thank you for saying that, because I wanted to write the book in a way that any person of any age could pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Because although it's called What They Don't Teach Teens, it's really for tweens, teens, young adults, and in some situations, like you said, adults who want to know their rights and other information. And so one of the ways I did that was to add some ink drawings by an artist I had found, just to kind of break up the material and make it more reader accessible.
There's a number of different topics in here that I thought were really, really important and are stuff that we haven't really talked about on the show before. And, one big one is about interactions with the police.
Yep, that's a huge one.
And so, yeah, you talking here about searches and about consensual searches and how you can tell the difference, I guess, whether a search is consensual or not, and, how sometimes it's really hard to tell.
Well, police interactions shouldn't be complicated, but they are. And obviously, they can become a heck of a lot more complicated in some situations based on someone's race, a disability, and other factors. So there are a lot of moving parts to police interactions. So I've covered those in 2 chapters. One chapter is about your rights under the 4th and 5th Amendment, including what you just mentioned about searches. The second chapter is about the interaction itself, how to have the safest police interaction possible. And that's when you get stopped when you're driving in a vehicle or on foot. And before getting into the heart of your question, I will say, as a prosecutor, I was concerned that I would get pushback from, people in law enforcement, because essentially I'm stripping away the veneer. I'm laying this out for people so they can understand what's going on here, and where do the police, try to find your weak spot, or what might the police officer say to trick you.
Yeah,
and
you're taking away their Jedi mind tricks a little
well,
bit here.
A little bit, and a little bit, and I did that for 2 reasons. Well, I did that because this is what I taught my own sons. And why, if a prosecutor is teaching his sons this information, well, why shouldn't other people be able to teach it as well?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I asked my law enforcement friends, I said to them, who had teenagers, I said, hey, how do you feel about me laying bare all this, inside information to my readers? And they all said the exact same thing. They said, Jonathan, what do you think I taught my son or my daughter?
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating that, they're teaching their kids the same information. So when it comes to searches are tricky because lawfully the police can only perform under the 4th Amendment reasonable searches. Case law has really, narrowed down what categories are reasonable and unreasonable. And I try not, like I said, I want this book to be accessible. So I'm not there writing this as a legal scholar. I want to distill this information to its essence, what you just got to know, and how you can implement these techniques and information in real time. Most searches are done, and here's the bottom line, most searches are done and performed lawfully by getting consent from the person to be searched. So the officer might have a search warrant, but most likely they won't. Right. The officer, there's exigency. The police can perform certain searches if there's an emergency. So there may be an emergency, but most of the time there isn't. There's other exceptions that the police can use to do a search without a search warrant. But most of the time, the vast majority of the time, the police are able to perform a search because you say they can. Now, when they're, quote, asking you, it may not seem like they're asking. It may seem like they're telling you.
They don't phrase it like, oh, hey, pardon me, would it be all right with you if I took a quick look in your trunk, ma'am?
Exactly. They're never going to say it like that. It's going to be something like, hey, anything in your pockets I need to worry about? Oh, no, you got nothing? Okay, you don't mind if I search you then. And then the next thing you know, they're patting you down. And look, I'm not criticizing, what police do, because by and large, at least in my opinion, the overwhelming majority of police officers wear the badge with honor, do their job with dignity. Yeah. But we all see examples, particularly involving racial injustice, where police brutality is real, and sometimes in entire communities. And so I do talk about, how you could tell an officer you're not consenting to a search. So if the officer is trying to get your consent, There's language I include in the book that I suggest. It's what I've suggested to my own sons. No, it will not work every time. Certainly, there are people who believe that no matter what they say, the police are going to do what they're going to do. And I'm not telling them otherwise. I'm simply saying that, it can work in some situations if the young person or any person says, sorry, officer, but I don't consent to searches. Now, you could use that, I could use that, but what I suggest my readers use who are, in their teens, you can probably push this into your early 20s. I don't think it will work much after that.
Yeah.
Sorry, officer, my parents told me that I cannot consent to searches. Now, what does that do? Again, in some instances, it may not do anything, but in others, it's going to change how that officer may perceive you. Yeah. So if you say, I'm not consenting to a search, well, now they got a wise ass.
No, you can't search me.
Exactly. Yeah. Get away from me, copper, right? I mean, that's never going to go well.
That's going to escalate. Yeah.
Exactly. You're blaming it on your parents.
Yeah,
now,
right.
If you blame it on your parents, officer, no disrespect, my parents told me not to consent to searches, is the officer just going to say, okay, no problem, have a nice day? Of course not.
Right.
The officer is going to say, what are your parents, lawyers? And what's your problem? Why I'm just trying to talk with you. Why are you giving me a hard time? And as I inform the readers, if you don't want to consent to searches, you have to repeat it.
You just keep saying it.
You just keep saying it. And again, I talk about racial injustice in the book. I talk about the reforms we need in the criminal justice system as a whole. I talk about police brutality. And I want to be very clear that, these situations, don't always work. But this is really important information for our young people to have. Because if you know your rights, one, they can be successfully evoked. And if your rights are not respected, by knowing them, you'll be better able after the fact to make a complaint and to know what they did wrong, to know how your rights were violated, and to hold the police accountable.
What about getting a ticket? So, cop gives you a ticket for something that you feel like you didn't do. Do you sign the ticket?
Yes. As you saw there, I have a section in my book that says exactly that. You sign the ticket. It's not an admission of guilt. You're simply saying you'll appear in court. And if you refuse to sign, you can get arrested on the spot. And what's interesting, one of the positive things of having 5 years to complete the book, or at least from inception to publication, is that I was able to, I do a lot of teaching on these topics. I teach at schools, I teach in private events. And so I was able to hear over and over some of the most common questions parents and young people ask me on police interactions and everything else in the book. And so that was one of the most common questions I got, like, hey, do I sign the ticket or not? Now, for me, again, as a 49-year-old, as a prosecutor and so on and so forth, to me, it was obvious. You just sign the ticket. You're not admitting anything.
Yeah.
But of course, I realized, having spoken to so many young people and their parents, that it's not obvious. And so, yes, sign the ticket. It's not admission of guilt. I also get asked a lot about whether it's lawful to record the police in public. Yes, it is lawful. But sometimes, the officers themselves don't know it's lawful. Other times, even though it's lawful for you to do so, and they may be aware of it, they still may push back on you. We've seen those situations. Don't record me. Officer, I'm allowed to lawfully record you. I'm in a public place. I'm not interfering with your work. Turn off the camera. My suggestion to my own sons would be, if you're afraid the officer is going to hurt you because, they want your camera off, I would want, everyone feels differently, I suppose. I would want my own sons to turn off the camera.
Yeah.
Should the officer be allowed to do that? No. But everything in this book is about our children, my children, young people. And when I say my children, I don't mean just as a parent, I'm talking about caregivers as well. Their children, the young people they care for in their lives. It's about them making it home safely. It's about them making good choices. And that's the goal of the book, is to give them information that they're not getting elsewhere so they can make informed decisions. Maybe they don't make good decisions. I mean, we can't control that, but at least they're informed decisions, right? Because you could have the information and make a lousy decision. Well, that's on you. But as your dad, if I give you the information and you choose not to make a wise decision, well, there's nothing more I could have done.
Hey, I at least, yeah, right. I did all I could.
Exactly.
Yep. And actually, hey, maybe that's not bad to make a couple of mistakes and learn from those and say, okay, actually, well, man, maybe I should have listened to Dad.
Well, you absolutely. Well, it's interesting because I talk about in the police chapters about some of my own police interactions. Because as I mentioned, I was a troubled teen.
Yeah.
I should not have lived through my teen years. I was a good kid who got pivoted off path, and I just made countless mistakes. So I talk about my own arrest. I was arrested for a nonviolent offense when I was 16. It was a property crime. The police had their guns on me. They thought I had done something more than I did. And I talk about in the book that there are many, many people, particularly those of color, who I described the night of my arrest. If they were in that situation, they may have been shot. And who am I to tell them otherwise? You just don't know what's going to happen in real time in any of these situations. But when I talk about my own troubles as a teen, I also mention, as it relates to your digital footprint and digital safety, smartphone cameras, that I got do-overs because the stuff I did that I shouldn't have been doing, there's no emails about it.
Yeah.
There's no photos because we didn't carry around digital cameras with us. We didn't carry around cameras because they were Polaroids and they were giant and they were expensive. So, it's harder for young people to get do-overs today.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of accountability. And it's unfortunate because, like you mentioned, teens, we all make mistakes, but this is the time in your life where, you got to test the waters a little bit. You're going to make perhaps more mistakes, more significant mistakes than at other times in your life. But unfortunately, some of those mistakes are harder to recover from than, when I was coming up.
Here's another question that I thought was really interesting. Can you walk away when the police are questioning you or talking to you? I mean, if they haven't arrested you yet, could you just stop answering their questions and just turn around and walk away?
That's a great question. And it's before I answer it, let me just say that I understand why many, many people don't know the answer to these questions, but it always astonishes me that we haven't taught this to people in school.
Yeah.
I mean, they're right.
You know all of this stuff. This is kindergarten. Like, you should be tested on this so you know your fundamental rights as a citizen. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's astonishing to me because math classes and like 100 math tests every year and science and all those topics are important, but
sure,
how about your rights? So yes, in some situations you can walk away from the police, but you should always ask. There's more nuances to this, and readers who are really interested can dig into the book and get more of the meat. But essentially, if the officer reasonably suspects you've committed a crime, they can detain you for a certain amount of time while they figure out, or conduct a criminal investigation.
Okay.
But if you aren't detained, so basically the officer's just chit-chatting with you, they don't have a reason objectively that they can stop and investigate you. But what they're going to do in some instances is they're going to chat you up. It's called a consensual encounter.
Yeah.
And then that may evolve into a detention based on what you say, based on what you do, based on what they see or observe while they're
reveal anything, or if they can see anything in the backseat of your car as you're kind of being...
Exactly. So, well, let me just say, you don't know in most instances whether you're being detained for an investigation or not. Okay, you're not going to know because the officer
kind of presents in the same way to you.
Exactly. It presents in the same way to you. So if you don't want to carry on a conversation with a police officer, but you're not sure if you're being investigated, you're not sure if this is consensual, you simply ask a question. Officer, am I free to go or am I being detained? Now, it is unlikely that you're going to get, you might, but it's unlikely you're going to get a clear answer to your question the first time you ask.
Yeah, right.
If you say to an officer, officer, am I free to go or am I being detained? You're probably going to get, why do you want to go? What are you hiding? What's your rush? I'm just having a conversation with you. And you'll have to repeat again, officer, am I free to go or am I being detained? You can go onto YouTube and watch videos of people, recording their police interactions. And sometimes on their first attempt, they get an answer, you're free to go.
Yeah.
But more often, they got to ask repeatedly until the officers will say, yes, you're free to go, or no, you're being detained. I'm investigating you for this crime. But again, this is how it should go. And I'm not saying it will always go this way. And again, when it comes to, racial injustice, when we talk about, people who are disabled, who suffer also greater police brutality, anything can happen in those situations, and things aren't always going to go as they should or how we want them to.
So, that strikes me as a lot of social pressure to be dealing with as a teenager, to have a, intimidating police officer who's, questioning you, and to assert yourself like that, repeatedly is not easy. I guess, how do we prepare our kids for that pushback that you're saying they're going to get from the cops, or how do we, give them the strength to kind of, stand firm in the face of that?
Right. Well, it's really hard. It's hard for adults to do. It's obviously even harder for young people. It's even harder for young people of color. So young people who are, are LGBTQ, may also be of color as well. So these things can overlap. Yeah. And so it's not always going to be easy. It's intimidating. And so I think that the starting point for all of this is, one, do the right thing. You are way less likely, not guaranteed, but you are way less likely to come into the crosshairs of the police if you are following the law. Of course, that's not a guarantee, but it's what I've told my own sons. If you don't do stupid things, if you don't do things that are illegal, it's less likely you're going to have to come, face to face with the police. But, what I've also explained to my sons is, if you understand your rights, when you have that inevitable police interaction, you should be able to stay calmer. You know the rules of engagement. You know what they're allowed to do. You know what they're not allowed to do. Be respectful. They deserve your respect. And I honestly believe that. I think police do deserve your respect. But I say to one of my sons, because I'm not sure how much one of my sons does respect the police. And so I said to him, I said, look, I don't know how much you respect the police or if you respect the police, but it's in your best interest to treat them with respect. There's, it's not going to hurt you if you're respectful. It shouldn't hurt you if you're disrespectful, but these things happen. And it's interesting because about a year ago, 6 months, 9 months ago, time, especially post-COVID, it all blends together, and it's like Groundhog Day in a lot of ways. But I was driving with one of my sons, and I got pulled over, and I have confidential plates, so by the time the officer gets to my window, he or she is going to say, okay, are you a prosecutor? Are you an officer? Because I ran your plates and nothing comes up. But so I get pulled over. It was a good stop. I violated a traffic law, no problem. Okay. And I wait, I don't reach for anything. No one should reach for anything until the officer gets to your window. You don't want to be reaching for your license registration when the officer is approaching. You keep your hands on the wheel. He approaches, I roll down the window. Before the officer can say anything to me, one of my sons starts yelling at him. I just about died. Whoa. And it was terrifying for me, because I thought, if I weren't here, and you were driving and you mouthed off to this officer, I'm not saying the officer would do anything unlawful towards you, but it's never a good thing to get an officer mad at you because you're being disrespectful. Why would you
want to piss off this person who has so much power over you?
Exactly. It's just a it's just a bad idea in every way.
Not smart. Yeah.
And so it was interesting because the moment my son started talking, the officer and I simultaneously told him to be quiet. Nothing had nothing to do with him. Mind your own business. And so, but anyway, it's complicated and it's emotional. And so, but I do want to say again, I know policing, particularly in certain communities, it needs to be fixed. We need reform in criminal justice. But I do believe the overwhelming majority of officers have their hearts in the right place. And it is some bad apples who are, doing these things that we see on TV all the time.
We're here with Jonathan Cristall talking about his book, What They Don't Teach Teens, Life Safety Skills for Teens and the Adults Who Care for Them. Here's a look at what's coming up in the second half of the show.
They were a little concerned about the unsettling nature of some of these topics, but it actually gave them greater confidence knowing that in the very unlikely event that some of these things happen, they'll be better equipped to handle it. Every expert in law enforcement, security consultants, and prosecutors who are familiar with this information all say the same thing. You never go. You always fight it out. If you go, there's going to be two crime scenes. One where the person took you, and two, wherever it is they perform the criminal act that they want to perform, but they can't do it at that place of contact.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So to say, if you come with me, I won't hurt you. I mean, that's, what's the likelihood of that?
Right.
Not very good.
Want to hear the full interview? Sign up for a subscription today. You get unlimited access to all the interviews I've conducted. It's completely affordable, and your subscription helps support the work we do here at Talking to Teens. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.